Aryna Sabalenka arrived in Rome as the undisputed queen of the WTA, world number one, feared by every name in the draw, carrying the weight of expectation across the entire clay season. Nobody anticipated what came next, because while Sabalenka prepared to dominate the 83rd edition of the Internazionale Nazionale d'Italia, a 20-year-old girl from the Philippines quietly walked through the gates of the Foro Italico, and the entire city of Rome stopped breathing. What happened inside those terracotta walls shook the tennis world to its foundation. What Italy gave Alex Eala at the 2026 Roman clay was something nobody saw materializing, and what Sabalenka witnessed left her without a single syllable. There is something uniquely brutal about clay season in European tennis. The surface punishes every weakness, exposes every technical flaw, and tests a player's mental architecture far beyond any other stretch of the WTA calendar. For Alex Eala, the spring of 2026 had been a waking nightmare draped in red dust. She had opened her clay campaign at the Upper Austria Ladies Linz Open, where crisp, unforgiving Jelena Ostapenko demolished her in straight sets, 6-4, 5-7. A defeat that stung not merely because of the scoreline, but because it came from a player Eala had defeated before. Momentum, so carefully constructed over months of relentless work, collapsed in under 2 hours on an Austrian court. Then came Stuttgart, where another first-round exit followed, this time against Leylah Fernandez, a player Eala knew well, a player she had traded victories with across multiple surfaces. The clay said something different. Madrid was supposed to be the recalibration. She had trained with obsessive intent at the Rafael Nadal Academy, the red clay there being as close to baptism by fire preparation as any facility on earth offers. And yet, the Mutua Madrid Open delivered its own verdict. Elise Mertens, seeded 19th, dismantled Eala 2-2, 6-1 in a performance so one-sided it triggered alarm among Filipino tennis observers worldwide. 2 wins across 3 clay events, a ranking that had once climbed to a career best 29 in the world, a number Eala earned with blood, serve returns, and iron discipline, had slipped to 44. The lesser player retreats. The truly extraordinary one recalibrates. Instead of entering the WTA 125 Catalonia Open, where she was projected as a top seed and where victory would have been plausible, Eala made a decision that startled the tennis community. She withdrew entirely. Not because of injury, not because of fatigue, but because the Italian Open in Rome, a WTA 1000 event, the highest tier outside Grand Slams, deserved her full, undivided, unapologetic focus. She returned to the Nadal Academy. She rested. She recalibrated, silently, while the rest of the tour competed in Spain without her. That decision revealed everything about who Alex Eala genuinely is beneath the soft smile and the quiet exterior. She does not play tennis to accumulate moderate results. She plays to compete at the summit. Choosing Rome over Catalonia was not strategic conservatism. It was an act of absolute ambition. A 20-year-old ranked 44th in the world, skipping a comfortable title opportunity to face Aryna Sabalenka, Jelena Ostapenko, Coco Gauff, Iga Swiatek, and the deepest WTA field assembled on clay in an entire year. Rome did not know she was coming, but Rome was about to find out. Stay with us, because what Italy did for Eala inside the Foro Italico is something no foreign player has experienced at this tournament in recent memory. And Sabalenka? She had front-row seats to all of it. The Internazionale Nazionale d'Italia is not merely a tennis tournament. It is an event woven into the cultural DNA of Rome itself, a spectacle of passion, noise, opera-pitched screaming, and a crowd that treats clay court tennis as a form of high art.
The Foro Italico, rebuilt and expanded to a staggering 55,000 seat capacity for 2026, with a brand new super tennis arena alongside the iconic Stadio Centrale, sits beside the Tiber River under Italian pines, surrounded by marble statues, while the terracotta dust hangs in the Italian air like something sacred. This is not Wimbledon's polite applause. This is not Indian Wells' clinical appreciation. Rome whistles. Rome erupts. Rome waves its hands and screams player names as though the outcome of every rally constitutes a matter of national honor. And when Rome adopts a player, truly adopts them, the player feels it in every cell of their body. Eala entered the main draw of the Italian Open, having earned direct entry through ranking withdrawals, a significant milestone in itself. For the first time in her career, she required no wildcard, no qualifying rounds, no favoritism from tournament directors. Her ranking, battered though it was by a rough clay stretch, placed her directly inside one of the most storied draws in women's tennis. She arrived unseeded, she arrived carrying 3 consecutive disappointing results, she arrived as one of the youngest Filipinos ever to step onto this particular stage. And Rome noticed immediately. Social media footage circulated across Filipino tennis communities and international WTA fan accounts within hours of Eala's arrival at the Foro Italico. Photographs of practice sessions showed Italian fans, not Filipino diaspora, not traveling supporters, but Romans themselves, pressing against the training court fences, chanting her name, requesting photographs, holding makeshift signs written in a combination of Italian and Tagalog. One sign, captured in a widely shared image, read simply, "Eala, benvenuta a Roma," welcome to Rome. The Italian public, sophisticated in its tennis knowledge and historically demanding of technical brilliance, had watched Eala's rise across 2025 into 2026 with growing fascination. Her U.S. Open first-round victory in August 2025, where she became the first Filipino in history to win a main draw Grand Slam match in the Open era, had broken through the language barrier and the geographic distance. Italian fans, perhaps more than any other European tennis public, understand the weight of history. They understand what it means to carry an entire nation's hope onto a tennis court. They recognized that weight in Eala, and they embraced her for it. When her practice sessions wrapped and she walked towards the player exit, fans reached over barriers with phones extended, calling Alessandra, Alessandra, the Italian adaptation of her name that somehow sounded like it belonged to the city, like it had always existed in the Roman air. She stopped for every photograph. She signed every item placed in front of her. She spoke in English, they responded in Italian, and somehow the exchange worked completely, because the language between athlete and admirer requires no translation. But here's where everything escalates, because Sabalenka witnessed Eala's reception at the Foro Italico, and what the world number 1 said afterward created a firestorm nobody anticipated.
The story of Alex Eala at the 2026 Italian Open cannot be separated from the story of what clay had already done to her that spring, because the reception Rome extended did not exist in isolation from the suffering that preceded it. The Ostapenko defeat, the Fernandez loss, the 6-2, 6-1 dismantling by Mertens in Madrid, the ranking drop from 29 to 44, the quiet strategic withdrawal from Catalonia. Each of those data points was visible in the context of what the Foro Italico crowds chose to celebrate. They were not celebrating a player on a winning streak. They were celebrating a player who had absorbed failure and chosen, against every temptation to protect herself by aiming lower, to walk directly toward the hardest possible challenge. There is a category of athlete the Italian tennis public understands instinctively, the player who suffers beautifully, who carries defeat with dignity, and who returns to the court with something harder in their eyes than before. Italy has produced enough of them across tennis history to recognize the species on sight. Eala is that species. The ripple effect of her Roman reception extended across WTA circles in ways that analysts are still measuring. Other players noticed, coaches noticed,
tournament directors noticed, the question circulating through the Foro Italico's corridors was no longer merely, can Eala navigate a difficult first round? It had evolved into something far larger. What kind of player does Alex Eala become when she is finally given a stage that matches the size of her ambition? Sabalenka's acknowledgement, brief as it was, signaled something important within the competitive hierarchy. When the best player in the world sees a name and says, she has something special, not because they fear that player today, but because they can already see who that player is becoming, it constitutes a form of recognition that reshapes how the entire field perceives that athlete. Eala's ranking would correct itself with time. Rankings always do for players of genuine quality. What Rome accelerated was something more durable, the widespread understanding that Eala does not merely belong on this stage, she commands it. The Foro Italico's capacity had been expanded to 55,000 for 2026, the most ambitious infrastructure project in the tournament's 83-year history. Marble statues lining the Stadio dei Marmi, pine trees filtering Roman afternoon light across clay courts, a new super tennis arena capable of hosting 3,000 passionate Italians who bring the same energy to WTA tennis that they bring to opera and football. This tournament was built to generate moments that outlast the calendar. And in Eala's arrival, in the crowd's unanimous adoption of a Filipino girl carrying 3 consecutive defeats and infinite forward momentum, it generated one for 2026. The coaching voices that had guided Eala through her Nadal Academy recalibration watched her move across the Roman clay and saw exactly what they had hoped to unlock, an athlete whose technical foundation was always present, finally operating within an emotional environment that amplified rather than compressed her instincts. The clay surface remains her most significant ongoing project, but projects for truly exceptional players are simply challenges that have not yet been resolved. Rome was not a resolution. Rome was a declaration of where Eala stands, who she intends to become, and what the WTA's clay season looks like when she is functioning inside an environment that believes in her before the first ball is struck. Moments in sport acquire their full meaning only over time. In the weeks immediately following their occurrence, they feel significant but still unresolved. Photographs still developing, stories still finding their final shape. The full weight of what Alex Eala experienced at the 2026 Italian Open will crystallize only across the years that follow, as her career continues its trajectory, and the context around this Roman Clay Week sharpens into clarity. But some elements of the legacy are already visible. For the Philippines, Eala's reception in Rome represented something genuinely historic. Filipino athletes have achieved extraordinary things across the global sporting landscape, in boxing, in basketball, in athletics. But women's tennis at the WTA 1000 level has been, until Eala, largely unexplored. The sight of Italian fans chanting a Filipino name across the terracotta expanse of the Foro Italico, holding signs in a language that connected Roman passion to Southeast Asian pride, was not merely a feel-good moment for Filipino sports media. It was evidence that the ceiling Eala is approaching has never existed in the precise form her career is taking. The first Filipino to win a Grand Slam main draw match in the Open era at the 2025 U.S. Open had now become the first Filipino player to receive an unreserved, organic, crowd-driven welcome at one of Europe's most passionate tennis venues. Those milestones accumulate, they compound, they transform from isolated achievements into the architecture of a legacy. For the WTA, Eala's Roman story represented the kind of narrative the tour genuinely needs, a player whose journey carries emotional specificity, whose background adds cultural dimensions to the sport's global reach, and whose quality of character generates admiration across audiences who may have had no prior connection to Philippine tennis. She is not famous because she was manufactured to be. She is famous because she earned it through a combination of extraordinary talent, unrelenting work ethic, and the kind of authentic human quality that crowds in Rome instinctively identify and reflexively honor. And for Sabalenka, the world number one, whose speechless pause in the face of Eala's reception became the tournament's defining image, there is a particular truth embedded in that moment worth sitting with. Champions are not merely defined by the opponents they defeat, they are defined by the opponents they recognize. Sabalenka's willingness to publicly acknowledge Eala's extraordinary welcome, rather than deflecting or minimizing it, revealed the greatness of character that operates alongside her greatness of game. She saw something real, and she named it honestly. The Italian Open 2026 will eventually be remembered for its results, for whoever lifts the trophy on the Stadio Centrale clay in mid-May, for the ranking shifts and the Roland Garros implications. But it will also be remembered for the week when Rome decided, before a single competitive result was confirmed, that Alex Eala belonged among the greatest stages the sport possesses. It will be remembered for a 20-year-old arriving with a broken clay season and leaving with something more valuable than any trophy: the knowledge that when the sport's most demanding crowds encounter genuine greatness in formation, they reach across every barrier of language and geography and say, "You are one of us." That gift cannot be ranked. It cannot be ceded. It cannot be withdrawn. It is simply, permanently hers. Was this just a moment or the origin of the greatest story women's tennis has produced in a generation? Drop your answer in the comments, because something tells me you already know what you believe. Alex Eala arrived in Rome carrying the weight of 3 defeats and the burden of an entire nation's expectation. She left carrying something Rome reserves for the extraordinary few. It's love. Sabalenka saw it, the crowd felt it, the clay recorded it, and the 2026 Italian Open, with all of its history and all of its grandeur, became the stage where the world finally understood that Eala's story is not approaching its peak, it is only now finding its beginning. If this story moved you, if you believe Alex Eala is destined for something historic, subscribe right now, because this channel covers every chapter of this journey, and the best chapters are still unwritten.